What's up guys, I'm BTC. With the addition of the 222 roll queue and the new tank Sigma, I've seen a lot of people asking who is a good choice to pair him up with. So let's run through all the characters and make a list. I started working on this video a little bit before Sigma was announced, but since I figured there was a good chance Hero 31 would be a tank, I decided to wait a bit, and I'm glad I did. Originally, I had planned on making one video that had every single tank combination in the game, but as I was writing the script, I realized that video would probably be over an hour long, and it would likely be a good idea to break it up, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start out with Sigma because he's the newest character, and I'm sure everyone wants to know who's good to pair up with him. So this right here is a chart that I'm going to be using. As you can see, it's been broken up into 5 different categories. Starting at the top, we have S tier, which is an extremely powerful combo with strong synergy, and they're going to be some of the best in the game. Moving down one, we have the A tier, which is still very, very strong and viable in many situations. Next one down is the B tier, which will still work, but there are some issues and also some weaknesses that will make it a little bit less optimal than some of the others. The C tier is where it starts to significantly go downhill. These are fairly bad combos, or at best, it's a very situational combo. And then lastly is the D tier, which is some of the worst in the game, and you should generally try to avoid using these combos. Also, quick note, using the best combos doesn't guarantee a win, using the worst combos doesn't guarantee a loss, but don't make it harder than it needs to be, and don't skate uphill if you don't need to. Alright, so let's get into it. The first thing I want to say is that Sigma hasn't been around for a huge amount of time, and it is entirely possible that some weird new strategy will pop up, but until that happens, this list is likely going to be very accurate. I'm going to start at the bottom with the worst possible combo and work our way up to the top to the best. So first thing is Sigma and Roadhog. The main problem with these two is there's almost no synergy at all between them. Unlike ERISA, who can do the pull-hook combo with Roadhog, there really isn't anything like that with Sigma and Roadhog. Yeah, you can try using the accretion the same way, but it just doesn't really work. Their ultimates are also very bad when used together. Roadhog needs to be close in order to be effective with his ultimate, and Sigma's ultimate puts them way high in the air away from Roadhog, so it just doesn't really work that well. Sigma also doesn't have any armor and only 400 health, which means that while his protective abilities are good, he kinda needs some extra backup that Roadhog just doesn't provide. Basically, unless some amazing new tech is discovered, don't use this combo. Moving on to Sigma and Reinhardt, this is a double barrier comp, and there are some interesting tricks that you can do with these two characters, but it's going to struggle with damage output. You can use this combo to try to leapfrog your way forward, but it's not all that effective. An interesting trick that can be done is Sigma can throw his barrier forward, and it moves at the same speed of a Reinhardt charging, so you can use it to keep him safe as he's moving forward, but really, you would just be better off using Zarya and bubbling the Reinhardt if that's what you want to do, because the bubble is going to protect him from all angles and from crowd control, whereas the Sigma barrier just protects him from the front. Also, the Reinhardt and Sigma ultimates just don't synergize well at all. Next up is Sigma and Winston. This is another combo that just doesn't really synergize all that well. Unlike Sigma and Reinhardt, which does have some situational uses, the Sigma-Winston combo seems to be lacking quite a bit. Sigma's defensive abilities are simply not going to help Winston at all when Winston is trying to attack the enemy back line. The barrier can be thrown over there, but just because of the way the angles work and all that sort of stuff, it's not really going to be that good. And it's also going to leave Sigma and the rest of the team quite vulnerable if you're trying to use your barrier to protect the Winston that's way on the other side of the fight. So generally, Winston needs someone to dive with him like a Deva or a Hammond, or he might need a Zarya bubble in order to beef him up a little bit. But Sigma can't do any of that, and it leaves Winston a lot more vulnerable than he should be. This combo just seems to put a lot of pressure on the weaknesses of both characters, as opposed to creating stronger synergy. The next combo is Sigma and Hammond, and while you might think this is similar to the situation with Winston, it's actually quite a bit better. I don't think this is going to be an amazing combo, but it definitely has its uses depending on the map. The difference between Hammond and Winston is that Hammond just doesn't need nearly as much support as Winston does. Hammond has a massive amount of health with that shielding, and he can also move in and out of the back line much faster than Winston can. This is why one of the comps that we saw just recently before the 222 Roadhog stuff was a single Hammond tank with 4 DPS. Hammond just didn't need all of that support that a Winston or a Deva does when he's going into the enemy back line. He can just go back there and do his thing and he's fine most of the time. This allows Sigma to be a lot more aggressive and to take up different angles when approaching the enemy. And while their normal abilities don't have a whole lot of synergy, their ultimates are incredibly strong together. Sigma can throw the enemy team up into the air, and Hammond can drop his ultimate right beneath it for some pretty massive damage. Next on the list is Sigma and ERISA. This is probably the strongest double barrier combo in the game. Unlike a double barrier using Reinhardt, both Sigma and ERISA have ranged attacks. Not only that, but both characters can use their attacks while their barriers are up. The leapfrogging barrier strategy is also a lot more effective as well. Sigma and ERISA have a very nice combo, which isn't quite as good as ERISA and Roadhog can do, but it's still very effective. ERISA can use the halt to pull a bunch of enemies together, and Sigma can hit them with the accretion ability. This will cause a good amount of damage and stun one of the enemies, but also does area effect damage to all of the other ones that get caught in it. Again, it's not quite as good as the Roadhog combo, but it's still not too bad. ERISA's halt is also really good for helping Sigma to get his ultimate on as many enemies as possible. Pull them all in together, use the ultimate, and then they just can't escape. A lot of times when people use double barrier comps, they're just thinking about replacing the barriers as they get destroyed. So ERISA throws down her barrier, it takes lots of damage, it gets destroyed. Sigma can then throw out his. But with Sigma, you can do so much more than that. So rather than just trying to replace the ERISA barrier, let's say that there's a Widow or a Hanzo up top. I can then throw this out, and now we have that protection from not only the ground attack, but also from those upper attacks as well. So we get a tremendous amount of protection. Or if there's a side route, I can always throw this over here and protect us from the side. So this is just an incredibly massive amount of area that is being protected by the barriers. Now granted, both of the barriers aren't as strong as something like Reinhardt would have, but this just gives you an incredible amount of area that you can control. Next combo is Sigma and Deva. It's kind of funny because Jeff Kaplan said that Deva's defense matrix was one of the abilities he wishes was never in the game, and then they went ahead and added another character that has something very similar. But anyways, this combo is not the most durable, but with a strong healing comp, it can be quite effective. Deva doesn't need to wait until Sigma's barrier is entirely destroyed. Instead, Deva using her defense matrix intermittently will dramatically increase the uptime of the barrier itself. Not to mention that Sigma has his own kinetic grasp that can help out with that as well. This combo does mean that Deva needs to play a little bit more passively than she normally would in a dive comp, but she can still be quite effective. One of the strategies that I mentioned earlier was how Sigma can throw his barrier out in front of a charging Reinhardt in order to better protect him. Well, you can do something similar with a Deva who's trying to dive into the enemy backline or up onto high ground. Normally, the Deva would use most of her defense matrix while she's using her boosters in order to get there, but then she's not going to have a whole lot of that defense matrix left over when she's actually in the fight, and it means she has to disengage earlier. But with Sigma, you can throw the barrier out at those angles to protect the Deva as she's boosting up onto that high ground, so that way when she finally engages the enemy up there, she has a lot of her defense matrix still available. And then Sigma can immediately recall the barrier if he needs to in order to protect himself or the other members of his team. In addition, Sigma and Deva's ultimate combo is one of the strongest in the game. And that brings us to the last possible combination, which is Sigma and Zarya. This is an incredibly powerful combo, similar to Reinhardt and Zarya. However, in this case, Sigma exchanges some of that defensive ability in exchange for far more damage than Reinhardt can put out. Zarya's bubbles will also help take care of any of the downtime that Sigma's barrier has when he's waiting for it to recharge, and this combo also allows Zarya to build her damaging charge very quickly, which helps her deal a lot of damage, and then of course that in turn builds her ultimate even faster as well. While there is some synergy between the two ultimates of Sigma and Zarya, you generally want to use them separately. The weakness in this combo is the relatively low health of both characters. At only 400 apiece with no armor, they can be taken down much faster than the other tank characters. This means that you need to have very strong healing, and a general strategy should be focusing on being aggressive and applying as much pressure to the enemy as possible. If you try to sit back and be passive with this combo, then your Zarya isn't going to build enough charge, and the enemy team is just going to be able to run right through you. That's all of the lists for Sigma. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I already started working on all of the other possible tank combos, and I'm also working on some healer combos as well. I may or may not do the DPS combos simply because there's so many and I would probably have to change the format up quite a bit. But if that is something that you guys would like to see, then let me know and I'll try to work on it. So in the meantime, what character would you like to see next? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.